the clearest way to land on your trifix is to isolate each center by itself.
With these trifixes, it's like the body center is the engine of the trifix. The heart center is like, who is the person that's being engined somewhere, right? The mind is like, how is that being engined? And you know what I mean? Like, how is the person getting around? How they're navigating?
Like a five's just amorally looking at whatever they're into, right? They're not.
Right.
It's not about, which side am I going to be on at the end of this, and is it going to be the good people?
The big hormone enneagram.
Hi, I'm John Lukovich, sexual self-pres, over the 5-wing, 458 Trifix.
Hi, I'm David Gray, self-pres, sexual, 9 with a 1, 974 Trifix.
What up? It's Emeka. I'm an 8-wing 7, sexual self-pres with 854 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I am a self-pres social 3, wing 4, with a 369 Trifix. If you like our podcast, guys, make sure you go like and subscribe us on the Apple Podcast app. And if you really like us, you should definitely leave us a review.
Welcome to Big Hormone Enneagram. Today, Nancy has passed, so rest in peace, Nancy.
Rest in peace,
she'll
Nancy.
Be back. She'll be back.
I hope you die in hell. Die in hell, Nancy. Burn in hell.
You will not be missed.
I saw her Instagram.
I'm just providing the 9 input.
Yeah.
Piece.
I saw her Instagram and she's like on a boat somewhere, like drinking and having fun.
I want to hear an intro from David.
What are we doing today?
That's a great start.
Yeah. So what are we doing? We're talking tri-type basics, right? Trifix basics. We roasted all the trifixes. Now we're going back to lay some groundwork on some of the differences within each of the centers, so that people can maybe use that material to help identify their tri-type. Trifix.
All right.
Well done.
People always ask about trifixes, how to figure out what's my heart fix, what's my head fix. And I tried to come up with sort of a short list or a resource for myself, first of all, and just something quick that I could copy and paste because people were asking the same question. So I wrote up a little guide that's been going around, like a short summary of each fix in each center. Because if you want to figure out your trifix, people get pretty confused sometimes with looking at each archetype and like trying to match each description to themselves. And hopefully the roasts that we did were specific enough that people could see themselves in those archetypes that we created. But if you really want to figure it out, you have to look at each center. So I had this list of little short descriptions of each fix.
I saw somebody post this, and I saw that it was Emeka's, and I was like, we got to do an episode on that because I thought it was great. It was very succinct and good.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, yeah, I mean, what we talked about last time at the beginning of the part 3 of the roast was what stood out for me in doing all these like joke names and talking about each and unpacking each trifix was the way the body center energy sort of was the engine in a way behind the trifixes. And so it wasn't necessarily that it's more important, but the body center energy was how the head and the heart were kind of getting thrust forward. So no matter what the first type in the trifix was, there was always this engine behind it.
Yeah, I think that's something that really struck me as well, just in terms of when you sort of typing people as a body type. That's the first thing I noticed is their gut center. And maybe it was a couple of years ago that you wrote something about the gut center and how they were different styles of dissociating. Mm-hmm. That really struck me. And thinking of the 8 fixation as a style of dissociation through action.
Pushing and action, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so that was a huge eye-opener for me in terms of observing my own 8 personality in the way that my attention is always trying to grab an experience and trying to force experiences. And there's a way that, similar to 9, that 8 isn't listening. Like 8 isn't
Or
like
one.
it's almost like deleting, all the gut types are deleting aspects of their experience.
They're in denial.
Yes.
Extreme.
Yeah.
Extreme. Yeah.
But it's like it's a very active form of denial.
Yeah.
And so
you wouldn't think of it as denial. That's what's interesting. I mean, maybe that's your point too. Is it's a dissociation. It's odd to think of action and force as dissociation.
right.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to notice that more and more in different ways, that I am denying what's actually happening, and I'm trying to replace what's happening with what I want to happen. Even just like in a conversation, I'm not fully listening. I'm only listening to the part that I think that I can use to respond or make, force what I want to take place.
That's been
where you
apparent
get
to all of us on these calls.
That's where you get the 8 chaos maker, right? Because then you're churning up the thing and you're making what you want to happen.
Yeah, but I think that's a very good point for 8-fix.
Yeah.
Is the style of wanting to force or amp up an experience.
One interesting pivot point too, just as a way to contrast, and is type 6. 6 is a reactive type, right? And there's a lot of different directions 6 can go. And so specifically when you're looking at 6s and what their gut fix is, that you can really see in a particular way, because it's a reactive type, how the type is sort of fueled with that, or has that engine behind it. Right? Yeah, it's really like 6s with a 9 fix versus 6s with 1 or 8. It's just a completely
Super
different,
intense.
totally different energy.
I'll also add though that I think part of what is useful about this call and pinpointing some of this is that you start to see, the operation of the centers and what the centers are doing. Like, what we just said about the body types with all these different forms of dissociation. So like the body center is how we hold and maintain ego boundaries and separate ourselves from our environment and protect ourselves. But yeah, it's like when we're not really here, we're not present, we're dissociating. And so it's different styles of dissociation. So a lot of times I think people will look at their body fix, for example, through the lens of, well, am I big and tough, or am I sweet and gentle, or am I uptight? And you're not going to figure it out that way. If you start to see how you understand your mechanism of dissociation, I think that's a lot more rich, because I'm a core 4, and I think my body center fix is pretty apparent. But as a 4, I'm also super withdrawn. So I could tell, I knew immediately what my body fix was, but I don't consider myself a particularly powerful person, because I'm stuck in my cave and hate sunlight and all this kind of stuff. But I can see how I push things. I have a big fat mouth. I kind of like when Emma, were you speaking to with your sister? I'll just kind of pin somebody to the wall in a certain way, try to pin them or get them on something in that kind of push way.
Yep.
If I get impatient, I just try to push something in a certain direction, even if I think it's going to be a mess. You know what I'm saying?
Right. A couple things about 8 and 8-fixers is the sense of immediacy. Like one thing I noticed the 8-fixers have is you just let it fly. Like if you're not sure, you just wing it. Just fucking go with it. Go with the most immediate thing that's right there. So that's the part of the chaos piece that shows up. I don't think 8s or 8-fixers are necessarily always wanting to whip up chaos, but the immediacy and just kind of going with your almost immediate impulse and not really sort of dissociating with action and forcing something is part of what creates chaos. You're like, I'm just going to ride this wave and I'm going to just do something, and then I'm going to just do something after that and keep going.
Creating chaos might be the wrong phrase. It's more like just when you do a push, you're setting off something that is going to be something that's totally unpredictable.
Right.
Yeah. The unpredictable in the gut center, 8 is not afraid of unpredictable, just the uncertainty of what happens next is I'm just going to jump into it.
And it's not very premeditated.
Yeah. It's just go.
And that literally just go. I feel that viscerally when I'm in an uncomfortable situation.
Yes. When I'm uncomfortable, my reaction is to do something. People might think that's confident, but it's not. It's just I'm replacing whatever sense of discomfort that I have with action. That's really all that's happened.
And I don't know about y'all, but I mean when I'm really angry, I have to slam my fist on a desk or whatever.
Mhm.
I have to physically discharge it in some way.
Yeah.
When I'm really, really, really angry, like when I'm at my peak anger, it becomes like it is action taking, and it's like the space between impulse and action gets shorter and shorter and shorter
Yep.
till it's like I can hardly control it.
Mm.
Where it just like I have to like fucking throw my phone on the ground or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes a lot of times with these online conflicts or whatever, I try to avoid them because I know that I'm going to be really angry. But I don't know what I'm going to say or what I'm going to do once the conflict starts. But like once you're in the middle of it, that whole 8 thing takes over, and the gap between what I'm doing and what I'm thinking I should do is there's no gap. I'm just fucking doing things, but somehow it's working, and I'm fucking kicking this person's ass or whatever. But it's like it's not something that's premeditated. I'm just like angry and just acting based on my immediate impulses, which is just taking it out on somebody. So it's an immediacy.
I was at a party that was on 4th of July. There was like this crazy, bizarre, fucking weird party on my roof that just happened. And I mean, like watching people have sex, kind of like weirdness on the roof, Brooklyn. But the Corona vibes are heavy and it's weird. And like I'm sitting down next to Ilaria on something, and this guy comes over and he starts like touching Ilaria.
Wait, what?
Yeah, and I was like, especially with COVID, I was like immediately, like I just felt the like, ugh, do push,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
and I was like, get away from her or something like this, and
Yeah.
and then he kind of like leaned in further because he was drunk and he saw I was irritated, so he was like gonna provoke me.
Oh
So I
wow.
got up and I just started fucking pushing him. But it was like real fucking immediate. There wasn't. It was like just protect woman. And he kind of like did like a thing and but went away or whatever. But I like just that he saw that I was willing to make it physical real quick.
Right.
Was the only message, because he was really, I mean, no mask on and getting in her space and stuff like this. But
Oh
it was
wow.
that thing where I could feel this is a danger, right?
Yeah.
And my first act, like I'm not very vocal with a lot of my publics, like my social blind, whatever. Like I don't normally like just say shit to people.
Right.
When my call out didn't work, I just had to escalate it immediately, but I could feel that boom, 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 escalate, like go.
Right. Right.
That's the other important concept with 8 and 8 fixes: protection. Protector.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't like the way people try to twist that online with
Sure.
that 8s are looking out for the underdogs. Like I'm not looking out for no underdogs, but
No,
But
it's
it's like-
it's who's in your circle.
right.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
it is somehow selfish. It's like these are my friends, these are my people.
Yeah.
Like if you think that you can fuck with anyone within
Yeah,
my
this boundary.
life, like you cannot cross this line, basically. Like
No, I mean I've sensed that from you, Emeka, and I love that. Like it's like, oh, Emeka's really got my back.
yeah. And it's also, I think 8 is also the sense of this is someone who has the capacity to escalate things 0 to 1,000 when it's necessary. It's going to be an immediate escalation. And so people on some level can sense that I'm willing to escalate this as far as it fucking takes. Like I'm going to escalate. If you cross this line, I'm going to escalate as far as fucking possible. And and they back, that's why they back off. They don't. Do you want to have to deal with that? It's not necessarily that I'm going to kick your ass, but do you want to deal with the escalation that you know is going to happen?
Right.
Right.
It reminds me of this could feed the idealizations of 8, but it's animal, right? It's a male animal that just reflexively goes into protection of his immediate territory and circle of tribe or whatever. It's just and it's got that immediate physicality of ready to fight and pull out the horns.
Yep.
And I will add too, and I don't want to just talk about us the whole time, but what I will add is to my point about being a 4 or 5, and somebody on some online group posted about like, do any other 4s really experience all their emotions in their bodies? And I was like, no. that's probably a 9. But I think when I was young, the disconnect between my body and my heart and mind was really intense. Like I was very schizoidy, dissociated or whatever.
Mhm.
And breath work and stuff has helped, but it's like it used to be like I would hardly be in touch with the signals and sensations of the body. And even like the whole sense of feeling would be in the heart center almost entirely without almost any body awareness of the physiological emotional responses. And so breath work and sensation work and all this kind of stuff has just helped me so much to actually sense and experience those things happening. So when I was younger, there were I've always had this sort of aggressive confrontational quality despite being as withdrawn as I am, but like the spurring into physical action was not always as there. Especially when I was like
Yeah.
threatened or something. Like there was a couple times when I was like a teenager where I remember kind of like freezing a little bit and knowing I had that thing in me that could do that, but it's like I couldn't reach it. And so as I've gotten older, it's sort of like a resourcefulness. Maybe that's through the 5-wing filter, but it's like
Mhm.
I've got all this physical resourcefulness that I knew I had, but I couldn't tap into, that now that I feel like I'm more integrated in my centers, I can do that. Does that make
That's
sense?
really interesting to hear from
Yeah.
someone who
So-
is an 8 fix, but coming from a 4 perspective.
Yeah, I mean, like I've always had this, like I mean, the way I speak, and I'm like, oh fuck this, and like kind of confrontational and pushing and trying to be provocative. But there were times when it was like real pressure, right? Like there was a real threat or something,
Right.
and I could feel like I think to other people's eyes, I was probably pretty damn able to get physical quickly, but I could feel myself that I couldn't do it that fluidly.
Even as an 8, I mean, there's always the sense that, man, you're being a bitch right now. There's always this kind of inner message that you're not going to be up to the you have to amp up more. Like that's sort of like you're not amped up enough. Like you're not actually like that. I wrestled in high school and I was a scrawny little, teenage kid that tried out for the wrestling team, and you've got like these seniors that are super strong and super fast, just kicking your ass, and it's just like this sense of I'm not up to this, and I'm afraid of getting my ass kicked, and just contending with that fear. And of course, you just like fighting that. So to other people, I was always surprised that there was one kid who was in my class or my same freshman class, who was later told me that he was intimidated of me, and I was like, what? Like, just thinking of what I was thinking of myself at the time. And for whatever reason, the coach had made me captain of the team. And I'm just like, this gap between what I see as myself contending with the fear of going up against people that are stronger than and better than me versus what people are seeing. So like maybe someone sees me as way more confident than I feel inside, because I'm still contending with my own, like I'm going up against things that I'm afraid of. So maybe some people see that as fearless, but it's like I'm dealing with feelings of self-doubt of not being strong enough,
Right.
not being good enough, but you still do it anyway. But it's like, it just looks different to other people.
Yeah, like
Right.
the difference between 8 and 1, I kind of do 8 and 1 versus 9. 8s and 1s in their own separate ways feel that they might not be bringing enough force
Yeah.
to any given situation, right? So I've got to crank this up. I've got to actually kind of conjure or convolute some more force to match the situation or overwhelm the situation, whatever I'm up against.
But I wonder if that's like a rejection type thing that you could, in a sense, say that the 2 feels like I got to bring more heart to this, and the 5 goes, I got to bring more mind to this.
Yeah, there you go. Sure.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And to your point, David, in terms of the gut fixes, 8 and 1 fixers tend to have those fixes add more force to the personality.
Generally, a 9 fix, there's this, even if you're not a core 9, you've got superego saying that force or conflict is the wrong thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I always experience with 9 fix people just like a real sense of being accepting, and like you can relax.
Mm-hmm.
And like,
True.
One of the stereotypes I think of a 9 fix is that they're like weak or something. And I mean, sometimes they can be, but I mean, I think anybody can be weak. Like I know very strong 9s and 9 fix people that are like, not just like emotionally or whatever strong, but like, like they've got this sort of potency to them, but it's not pushing potency,
True.
Yeah.
It's like ocean there.
It's ocean that's gonna, you could throw a nuclear bomb in there.
Yeah.
And the ocean's just going to absorb it.
Right. Yeah. It's very encompassing. And so like they might be, I don't know, like a lot of 9-fix-7s are still like really intense people, you know?
Right. That was a point I wanted to make, that you can see these fixes when, for example, an assertive type has a 9-fix, for example. So we're like a 7-wing-8, which is a fucking really loud blowtorch of a personality, has a 9-fix. And you can really zero in on what does a 9-fix add to a personality. And so you get a lot of this wide acceptance. Like, okay, you have on one hand a personality like a 7-wing-8 who can be really obnoxious, but then you have the 9-fix, which can be really accepting and kind of fuzzy and vague around that kind of acceptance. It's like, so those two things combined, this is someone who, while they're obnoxious, is going to be wanting to see the good in people or see both sides. That kind of vague fuzziness around boundaries shows up. So a good point to make about that people should know about figuring out their fixes is that you kind of have to hold on to each of these the other centers that's not your core type kind of loosely to see the subtle things that those types might add to the core type. It's not going to change. A 7-wing-8 is always going to be 7-wing-8, but it's looking at the way a 7-wing-8 is managing the needs of their gut fix. And like, so is it going to be like a fuzzy, vague inner confusion that shows up in like, how do they manage those kind of boundaries? Are they going to be more accepting of people?
It gives you that sense of, I mean, it's almost so subtle that it's hard at all to bring any language to, but it's like a 7-wing-8 with a 9-fix, right? It's like you're getting really subtle distinctions about the way centers are being used. So, as we keep going back to like body centers, ego boundaries, and how those are maintained. So the 7 part, the mental center part that wants to go get the juicy object or whatever, is very powerful, overpowering. It can be insensitive, it can be boom. But then in terms of how they kind of maintain a sense of self, like part of the ego boundary thing is like what you allow in to be affecting you.
Separation. How are they managing those kind of?
Exactly. And so like, as a 8-fixers, like our sense of separation is like, haha, we're being separate now. Like it's like separate.
We've always been separate.
Yeah, a 1-fixer is like, it's like, well, that's not right, so it's separate. And then a 9-fixer is like, maybe.
Yeah.
So you can get like a 3 or a 7 that are like very powerful 3s and 7s, and at the same time they get a 9-fix. And so when they're going for the goal or they're going for the object through the lens of their dominant center, when it comes to accessing their 9-fix, it's like their sense of self, in a way, it's more allowing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've noticed even, assertive types like 3 or 7 that have 9-fixes still have this sense of being able to over attune to other people or really attune to other people's states. I've had plenty of experiences with 3s that have 9-fixes. And on one hand, 3 is kind of a self-interested, they have their aims, they have the things that they want to get done. But what kept me hooked in those relationships was just the 9-fix sense of wanting to attune to, I understand you, or I can meet you wherever you're at, or willingness to bend to that other person or absorb parts of that other person. So like, an assertive type that has a 9-fix can end up seeming a lot softer. Their boundaries are a lot more fluid. Yep.
We'll say a little bit more about 1-fix. And I think that I want to read from some of your notes, Emeka, that you sent us, because I think that they're just clear and very good. So you wrote, in the body center, your fixation is how you're maintaining ego boundaries. It's how you're creating psychological boundaries and distance internally and externally. And that's really important that it's both. Ego boundaries, again, it's not just you're separate from your environment, but it's like parts of yourself that you want to be separate from too. So like when we talk, it's dissociation. So like 8s will dissociate from their own vulnerability, right? And 1s are most famous in terms of putting inner boundaries against themselves, because things against themselves or that they don't want to contaminate them or make them feel like they're wrong or bad or corrupt. So 8 is what Emeka wrote. Forcefulness and impact, pushing and expanding out, amping up the expense of softer and smaller inner parts. 9, fuzzy and unclear, inner confusion from dispersed and cluttered needs and wants. I think that's a really good line right there. Diffuse, absorbing of outside influence. And 1, rigidity and self-control, high standards of purity maintained by self-restriction, moralistic criticisms, and judgments. Those are great. And I think we spent the least amount of time with one, but and one fixes are pretty rare, I think.
Yeah, that's
Um,
true.
it adds a sharpness and precision to the personality, big time.
Mhm.
And so like Ilaria is a 4 with a 1 fix, and 4 is a little bit of like dysfunctional, and yet she's got this sort of it almost gives her like an academic quality, I'd say.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that does make sense. There's something like the active criticism. It says certain kind of
Mhm.
like eights, for
Warming
example,
up.
can express anger just like a blowtorch, just like let it go, let it fly. And ones can channel that anger, or they're pushed into like a sharp
Yes.
point of criticism.
And it's not even necessarily like criticizing. Like it can be like I said, the academic thing. It's like like you talk about academic criticism. It's like this sustained pick thing.
Yes, yeah. It's almost like an ideal pure state that you're trying to get to, and you're chipping away, like almost like a sculptor chipping away at the parts that don't belong.
It's directing that. So like if 8 is just the energy bursting out, 1 is directing it through a channel
Mhm.
towards something, pointing at something.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's how it feels to me.
Yeah, it like 8 and 9 can be both very sloppy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Right.
And but 1 is very precise channels.
1
Yeah.
gives Ilaria, that's part of her boss energy, right?
Super
too?
boss.
Right.
Little boss thing. We were talking about grooves and attachment types and getting into grooves. But with 1, it's not like a groove so much as it's like the barrel of a gun that is like very clean, so the bullet just has no, just
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, that's the thing, is it's that narrowing that force, that fuel through a straight something at something.
You want to go to the image center?
Yeah, let's do image.
All right, so we are recording this at the end of another conversation we had that we're making another episode, and in that we were talking about how no matter what somebody's main type is, what a wounding it can be for people to feel that somebody is not seeing them the type that they believe they are.
Mhm.
And so I said in the other recording, whatever, hell hath no fury like somebody who feels that their type is not seen, especially when they are mistyped.
The type that they think they are.
The type
is
they
not
think they are, yeah, is not seen. And I'm fascinated by this from the point of view of how the potential for wounding there, like it's only in the last couple weeks that I've started to really realize like how intense that is for some people. But like the intensity of being seen and how we see ourselves. I think there's a way that we can view appearance, even inner appearance or ways we represent ourselves to ourselves, as somewhat superficial. But it's a really important, really not well understood mechanism of the personality where we need to we uphold a certain view of ourselves, and that view can be more or less accurate, but we maintain that view in particular ways, and we draw from different facets of our experience to inform ourselves of that view. And so, no matter what our main type is, our heart fix is what we're drawing from to have us to see ourselves, to understand a felt sense of our identity, and to feel positively about ourselves, and to to maintain a cohesive sense of identity, as well as the habitual range of feelings that we allow ourselves to have. So Emeka wrote, in the heart image center, your fixation is your preferred way of maintaining a self-image. 1 might feel, quote, I should, unquote, show. And then 2, sweetness and care. Like I need to show sweetness and care, positive emotions, heartfelt love and affection, goodness and serving. And what I would add to people's general understanding about the centers and fixes is that you can think of 2, 3, and 4 as like 3 different sides of our identity. And that all of us, our identity is like it's not a fixed thing really. It's a in process experience, and there's 3 main stances. Like part of being in relationship, like 2, for example, is the part of the heart center, part of our identity that knows who we are through relationship, right? Like we know a part of ourselves based on the part of ourselves that comes out through relationship. So 2 fix emphasizes that. On type 2, it's like that's where they're naturally at, the part of our identity that arises from relatedness. And so in a 2 fix, you generally get these more relational feelings, generally more positive, maybe not more positive than 3-fix, but more like sweet feelings.
Yeah.
It's more relational.
As compared to 3, for example, which is a good comparison, which is more accomplishment oriented. And
Yeah.
I think one of the easy misconceptions is that 2-fixers and 2s feel burdened. There's a
Mhm.
sort of there's a heaviness in 2 about feeling burdened or feeling like obligated or something. And that, like, I think it's on the outside, those 2-fixers are generally the most warm, touchy, physically touchy types. But like, I think sometimes people can't see their 2-fix because they feel the burdensome part of being a 2.
It's also like that people are imposing what they imagine 2 is in terms of, oh, I'm just a doormat that wants to help people and I don't know my own needs, but not recognizing that 2-fix is describing a way that their attention is going towards more relational concerns, how to be of service, of use to other people, to have like an ethos of, I don't want to be someone who brings harm to these relationships. I had a person who was typed recently. We were discussing about their 2-fix, and they were like, "Well, I'm not a doormat. I take care of my own needs, and I mean, I'll help people if it's not too much trouble, but it's not like I'm just running around helping people all the time." And I was trying to explain to her that 2-fix is like a sort of a perspective that you feel like you should be a point of contact that helps people, that you shouldn't bring any negativity in the way that you relate to other people, that you should be some kind of a source of care. Not to say that you do all the time, but it's like this is where your attention goes. This is the kind of image that you would like that you'd like people to have of you, whether or not you do anything at all. That's what a 2-fix would add to a personality.
Did you want to finish reading those?
Yeah, I'll go into 3. So Emika wrote 3: excellence, accomplishments, repressing emotion, value and success fitting a recognizable mold. And like with the 2, there tend to be a lot of, I see 2 basic flavors of this, where it's like you either see a lot of more like a positive feeling good about oneself and therefore feeling good about one's life and experience, kind of like an eagerness, or they can have this sort of like very focused, almost efficiency kind of flavor that can almost seem emotionless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing that energetically the 3-fix tends to add that I've been recently noticing is that 2 and 4 in the heart space have overt emotional notes that they add to something. Like 2-fix is gonna make someone express heart energy more
Right, a
overtly.
Hallmark commercial.
Yeah, just like there's gonna be more emotionality there.
More
Whereas
color
3,
with 2 and 4.
yeah, there's some color there emotionally in the heart space. Whereas 3 is the type that sort of clamps down and represses emotionality in the heart space. And in the moment, it can feel icy.
I think they feel deeply, but I don't think that they let it fly.
Right.
Like a
Right.
2-fix will just let it fly by like you're talking with them and then they like hold your hand and like look deeply into your eyes, and then
Mhm.
4-fix is like no, like I don't like it or whatever.
Yeah.
But the 3-fixer, like they might be very sensitive and emotional, but they just don't let it go in the same way. There's a little bit more of a awareness of what any emotion that's embodied, what it might convey.
The value and success fitting a recognizable mode is something that was kind of an unexpected insight that I got from 3s, is that from my perspective is if you want to achieve value, but it's important that it's recognized. It's important that it's quantified. If in order for it to be recognized, it has to fit a mold that people have seen before, usually. So a lot of times you get 3s and 3-fixers that end up in patterns of wanting to follow trends. Just you want to get that hit of validation and get that hit of success, which has to be based on other people recognizing it. So it can be limited to a certain degree, because how do I achieve that? By going off on my own path. I have to sort of play within the sort of lanes that society has set up for me that they're willing to recognize as success.
Got a quality about it that's like a model or a mannequin.
Yes.
So it's constricting itself into that sort of being a fashion, figuratively speaking, it's like being a fashion model where you're supposed to be a neutral thing, an ideal, but you're putting on the garments of a certain mold or whatever, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm getting some new notes from this conversation, and one I would add to the 3 is, modeling the ideal. Modeling is such a direct hit of what 3s are trying to do,
Yeah.
which gets at that value and success fitting a recognizable mold is something that really struck me about 3 that's similar to 9 is that they're looking out there for what they're supposed to be.
And for listeners, though, like it's not as crafted. It might sound like we're speaking to here. Like,
Yeah.
I think the 3 fix is like probably the most common hard fix.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of normal in a certain way.
Right.
Like, but it doesn't look like the crafting, but as y'all are speaking to, it's like there is drawing from something external to shape in a certain way that's like just happens unconsciously.
Yeah, we don't want to do the typical 3 bashing,
Well,
Yeah.
just to say that it's not like this sort of chameleonic crafting, falsifying thing that sometimes
No.
people, when
Yeah.
they hear these dynamics, can interpret it as that.
From what I get from 3s that I really value and appreciate is they can zero in on how to get from point A to point B. They can really zero on a potential and sort of the steps to get from there, like to motivate yourself at each step to say, okay, this is what you need to do to achieve this goal. And this goal is very clear and quantified. So I like to see the clarity that 3s and 3 fixtures have in terms of wanting to get from point A to point B and the self-motivation based on like a prize.
Mhm.
That you set up a prize and it's like, I want to
Mhm.
achieve this, and you work towards it step by step. And so I think culturally, I think Americans are very familiar with this. I think it's sort of embedded in American culture to, set your goals and work at it step by step, and you'll get there. Motivate yourself. You can do it, that kind of a thing.
It has a quality that's like the psychology is another metaphor or whatever it's athletic. You know what I
Yes.
mean? It's like everything that goes with athletics. You know what I mean? It's building up. It's there's a quality about it as a psychology that's muscular, working out towards towards goals. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it can be life goals, right? I mean, but it has that quality of running your drills and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
I think that phrase of like recognizable molds,
Yes.
I think that's really key because, even if they're like social blind or whatever, I think that generally speaking, someone with a 3 fix will kind of directly reference genres in terms of
Self.
their appearance and style.
Mm.
It might be there's just like an intentionality of how they're presenting themselves it's like it just seems like that's what everybody does, but for a 3 fix there's some level of awareness of the mold that I am signifying or even just being a variation on.
And another thing that someone, I don't know if it was you, David, that mentioned this, that something that's really common with 3 fixers is this sense of career
Yeah,
and your life arc as representing this progression.
I am what I do.
Yes. And some people might hear that and frown at that as like, oh, that's not me. But recognizing that this is American culture, this is a big part of just being here that people don't realize, that there are a lot of cultures where people don't ask you what you do casually, like as part of getting to know you. So much of this culture is based around what you do for a living. Like identities are centered around career. And it's very much a 3 and 3 fixed thing to not really put much separation between a career path in themselves and to see their identity based on the kind of career arc that they have.
So continuing off of Emika's thing, 4, withdrawn individuation, negative emotional states, chronic disappointment, self-distinct taste in aesthetics.
So like 2 is me and my relationships with special certain other people.
Yep.
3 is sort of me relative to people as a model for something.
Yes. Right.
And then 4 is me looking at myself and my relationship to myself, right?
Yeah, what I always say about 4 is like to help people understand is that 4 is like who you are untainted by reality. What is the ultimate kernel, the single point that it defines me? Like what's the core of the core of the core of like my soul or whatever? And so the whole thing about 4 is over individuating that and trying to like bring that out and create some congruence between my outer life, including my body, the way I speak, everything, and trying to make it congruent with that inner sense. But it's like this kernel that is like almost like on a different level of reality or something. So there's this sense of intense separation from everything, including my own psyche, my own body. Try to be that unique totally personal kernel, and like Almas calls it the pearl beyond price, right? It's that focal point of identity that's not conditioned, not based on anything external. And so the 4 is constantly separating themselves and going inward to find what's that unique individual thing that's me. So it's like a very opposite strategy from 3, where it's like I'm actualizing my identity through action, through doing, through I'm figuring out who and what I am through
modeling an outside thing too.
Yeah, that's a very key difference. 4 is trying to find the mold that is completely entirely your own.
Never been produced. It's not even a mold, because then a mold could be reproduced.
Exactly.
Right.
It's and sometimes I find myself thinking of, as having a 4 fix, what is the thing that only I could do, that there's no one on this planet ever before or ever after could do, which is a really difficult thing. You have to start thinking about, like, what am I really? What is the truest expression of my existence that only me in this entire history of all mankind could express? That is sort of like what 4 is looking for, is completely separate from everything. What am I?
Right. So I just pulled up a little writing I did on the Feeling Center, and I wrote, 2 seeks identity through relationship and being of service. 3, and I mean this as 3 or 2 is the part of us, 3 is the part of us that seeks identity through self-actualization. The personality style is doing to become. It's like recognizing potential inherently, and then how do I turn that into self-expression? And then the 4 is seeking identity through individuation and introspection. This type represents the wholly personal and interior facet of identity, of who or what one intrinsically, quote, is, unquote, apart from the environment, apart from early experience, and even apart from such determinations like the physical body. In other words, 4 represents the part of us that wants to know, wants to see and know ourselves as our core intrinsic fundamental character, our innermost kernel of something that is, quote, our own, distinct from anything else. And so part of having a 4 fix is this, it's like, as you're speaking to, it's like, what is mine that's not somewhere else's? Someone else's somewhere else. It's like, if I can locate it outside myself, it doesn't feel like it's mine.
Yep. Exactly.
It's one reason why 4 is the antidote to 9, and what I mean by that is, again, the age-old subject,
illness of 9.
The illness of 9. 9's identifying as 4 is because 9 is that ocean, right? So if your selfness is spread across an ocean, it doesn't have that distinct point that 4 represents.
That Almas idea of 4 representing the distinct point, it really hit something for me, because it really captures the sense of separation. Like, you're trying to remove every outside influence and try to locate the atom of your existence, like the thing that set everything off. That is
atom. No, that's so important and so overlooked and not understood in 4. That's like all the 4 verse 9 thing we talk about. It's like people will talk about the emotionality of 4 and the depth or whatever, but it's like all that depth comes from pushing away. It's like the sense of depth is that what happens to the personality is that the surface of things is artificial, and I have to push away from it, and I have to go in or away, and so it becomes alienation. And I always think it's interesting with 4 next to 5 in that way, because 5 is also very alienated and separating, but coming from the lens of the heart center versus the head center.
Yeah, they're counterparts.
So like in a 4 fix, like, someone will aesthetically be trying to draw on like a unique palette in terms of their preferences, in terms of the way they dress and their sense of identity. There's a natural sense of guardedness about their inner life that I don't think 2 and 3 fixes have.
Yeah.
And also from that, a kind of self-absorbed narcissistic quality, fussiness about preferences and all that.
That's one thing to ping off of, is the image types, the heart types, as different forms of narcissism.
Yeah, that's good. Different forms of narcissism.
Yeah, it's like different forms of dissociation, different forms of narcissism. That's really good.
When you look at like 2 and 2 fix narcissism, you're looking at someone who is invested in being someone people can go to be taken care of in some kind of way, or at least not being someone that is going to be hurtful. Like, they have a narcissism in being a source of goodness. And 3 has a narcissism of being valuable in some kind of, that could be different depending on the 3 and 3 fixture, but I know what I'm doing. I can make things happen in this arena. 4 narcissism, or four fix narcissism is just I'm distinctly myself. Sometimes people have said to me, or like, you should just get paid to be Emeka because that's all you know how to be. Much of my existence is just saying, fuck that, fuck that, fuck that. My views are my own, and it's not playing off of anyone else's thing. So it's very Emeka. You know what I mean? Like
Playing off of anybody's thing is very good distinction. 4 versus 2 and 3.
Yeah, because it just feels like you feel ashamed when there's a likeness.
That's right.
It's like, what's really sometimes I'm like, I haven't really found my view yet, because if it's too similar to someone else's, that it's not really mine. I mean, maybe I think similar to that person, but that means I need to go a little bit deeper to figure out like what I really
That's right.
view in this situation, because if it's someone else is mirroring that, then it's probably not really mine. You know, like it's because mine, whatever is mine, I'm the only one on planet Earth who can express that. So if I really go deep enough, that's what I'm going to find.
On that group that's full of the 4 group that's full of 9s that think they're 4s, when someone posts something, all the 9s go, "Oh, same."
Yeah. Oh my God, same.
What they're not getting is that as a 4, to go same, not everything, but most things, is shameful.
Yeah.
Like you might say something like, "Oh, I like this movie," and I'm like, "Oh, same." You know, no problem there. It's a superficial example, but like to continuously be going, "Is this common for 4s to feel like this?" I mean, even when I know that something is common for 4s to feel a particular way, I'm embarrassed that I partake in 4ness in that. You know, because I mean, that was the thing about learning the Enneagram, was that I realized that if I was a type that was like everything but my personality was described in a book, I was the same as fucking 100 million people, and I was like disgusted by that.
The feeling I get sometimes, the impulse in me is that if I'm agreeing or saying, "Oh, I agree with this person," that means I haven't really found my own viewpoint. You know, it's kind of lazy. It's like, if I don't want to actually think about it and figure out where I'm at, then I can just, you know, agree with something that I sort of agree with. But if I really think about it, it's not really, I can't really agree with what they're saying, because it's not where I'm really at. So it feels like with the 4 fixes, like I have to find my point. And it feels like I have to always express myself from, you know, the atom of my viewpoint is.
Well, I think it's a really great and simple way to put it. There's just this constant sense of pushing away, and it has to be like you know, my interest in just politics, for example, is, I mean, I grew up, my dad's a political cartoonist, so even though I'm social blind, it's like it's a weird thing I've got where I'm interested in it. But it's like I started to be clued in on how people just, like, it's a lazy way to put it, but didn't think for themselves in terms of adopting sort of cultural attitudes and opinions about things. And part of the thing is like, because it's this reaction against what's like other things, there's also a thing in this, comes up in 4 fixes, where I'm holding up the shadow element, right? Like I'm holding what other people aren't seeing, and I'm kind of being the bleeding wound to kind of direct attention to how fucked up things are.
Yes.
Like, so like it's not just like, oh, I'm going to be very unique, and you know, I will have lots of colors that are very bright and colorful because it's different. It's always got this sense of also pulling away, but being wounded and pulling away.
Yes.
And, you know, like I was like, you know, people pretend like the fucking CIA is like a cool thing, and I'm like I got to learn about how fucked up the CIA is, because I don't want to
think it's cool.
Everything is cool, and I'm suspicious of that by nature.
Yeah.
I have to understand, and I get little hints where maybe the CIA is actually just a you know, a force that props up capital at the expense of human lives across the world. And so like I have to like know about it, because it's like this thing that people are so unnuancedly, generally speaking, in our culture positive about. I got to really understand. Like as Emeka said earlier, it's like I feel like it's just pure laziness unless I like really know my own unique perspective based on, you know, if I go along with, not unique perspective, but if I go along with the predominant perspective, it feels like a complete like inner laziness.
Part of what you're hitting on there too is with 4 and 4 fix is things aren't true unless the negative thing is the thing that's the truer true.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the distinctions that I tried to make, is that, yeah, it's one thing to want to hit on, you know, your own unique and distinct perspective, but generally 4s are looking for that in uncovering and embodying negative perspectives, or uncovering and embodying in the shadow of things. Because I mean, generally, the predominant perspective in the mainstream or just in general, people tend to look at things positively or neutrally. There's very few people that are wanting to look at the uncomfortable truth of a situation, which is tends to be things are really fucked up. And so 4Fix is wanting to find a distinct point and to sort of separate themselves from where everyone is going. That's generally going to be in the direction of things are really messed up here. Things are really fucked up. And this thing that we're avoiding, this tragic problem that we're all not talking about, this is what we need to be talking about.
Yeah. All right. Head center. So when it comes to head fix, this is like this style of your thinking. So reading again from Emika's little cheat sheet, in the head thinking center, your fixation is how you're compensating for not knowing and trying to navigate and understand what's real. Each head fix is overdoing a different style of insight. 5, dissecting, uncovering the unknown, conceptualizing, granular overfocus. 6, hypervigilance, guidance outside of oneself, orienting to a system or to a structure. 7, possibilities, animated interestingness, multifaceted options for experience.
Yeah, I felt like this one was, the distinctions are pretty easy and clear, at least for me. It's very clear to me in what type of insight that someone is trying to use to navigate what they don't understand. Or even when in the context of people trying to figure out the Enneagram, people that are sixes or six fixed go about it a certain way. And it's a sense of, with 6 and 6 fixtures, for example, of trying to find an orientation to the structure of the Enneagram. Like they start to list different sources. These teachers say this, trying to reconcile the contradictions, and they're hyper vigilant about things that don't fit, asking lots of questions. And so it takes on a form of, even as they're trying to figure out what their type is, they're trying to prove it to themselves. So I see a lot of times with 6 fixers looking at like, well, who wrote the paper on that? Being hyper vigilant about what the sources of something is. Like I need to put a structure around this thing that I don't understand, that it has to be some kind of outside sources guiding me towards understanding.
Well, there's a certain faith in a way, in agreement, in corroboration.
Yes.
Like not necessarily agreeing with the mainstream point of view or something, but the 6 fix naturally goes to, okay, this is something that others have, like even if it's just this authority or just this book or just this scholarship or something, it's like, okay, this has some precedent and it's not just coming out of the ether.
Yeah.
And that pings with the thing we talked about in the last conversation, echoes. The attachment types are looking for echoes or attracted to echoes.
That's
and
a very
so
good point.
that kind of fits in with that idea, what you just said, John.
Mm-hmm. You know, talking earlier about the body center being like the engine. Tell me if this feels right or not, but it's like with these trifixes, it's like the body center is the engine of the trifix. The heart center is like, who is the person that's being engined somewhere, right? The mind is like, how is that being engined? And you know what I mean? Like, how is the person getting around? How they're navigating? I don't know if that.
Yeah.
No,
That does make sense, because each center feels different. Like
Mm-hmm.
you know, the gut is like the energy center.
Mm-hmm.
Like you know, anger is kind of like a fuel for the car.
I
And
mean, what anger actually is in the body center is just like we call it life force.
right.
It gets pushed into a certain place, like a density of life force.
Mm-hmm.
And the image in the heart center, just it doesn't feel like motion. It just feels like how you're framing yourself, what you're seeing in the mirror. So I guess that makes sense that it would be the actual person. Like this is the identity of the person in the car.
Right.
And then
My GPS or whatever.
right. And then the fucking head center is the GPS or the way that they're driving.
Or how do I figure out the puzzle for how I get to some?
Oh yeah, the map.
It's
how
the
do
puzzle.
I get from?
Yeah, it's sort of like I can go backwards from the gut. Like say the head fix is kind of how do I mobilize? Right. It's sort of in some sense you could think of it as head types in some sense, not trusting people that are core head types, not trusting their capacity to mobilize. So they're doing too much thinking in order to take the place of the mobilization, the nonverbal go.
So they're overdoing a certain style of thinking.
Right.
No, that's a good way to look at it. And just my experience of head types in general, like, for example, we've had Enneagram Universe for a couple of years now, and it's interesting to see like the kinds of the individuals that keep the group going in terms of the action going. And it's always head types, like 6s and 7s, just like basically like, run the group in terms of who's like generating the most posts and getting people talking. 6s and 7s.
Questions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to the 5 fix, there's always this perspective to me where they're in a castle and like their exchanges are being like sniped, like shot down from a you know, because it's like there's like a spaciousness and but at the same time like a precision delivery, and as you said, like conceptualizing, granular over focus. But you know, unlike the 6 fix, which is like, okay, this feels okay because it's pinging off all these sort of references and footnotes and all this kind of stuff. The 5 fix, it's not to say it doesn't value that, but those things are beside the point, which is to go into totally what's unknown.
Yeah.
And so so you do get this kind of like,
it's similar to the 4 thing of wanting to find the singular point of identity, but with 5 it's like, if I go deep enough, I can find this singular point of insight into this thing that
I hadn't been seen yet.
I haven't seen yet, which could explain everything. You know, like if I could just get to this singular kernel, you know, that it's gonna explain the whole thing.
It does feel similar to the 4th thing, but a totally different flavor at the same time.
It's a different kind of being unique.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I see 5 fixers constantly like to throw something a little bit provocative or challenging, or that they like just to say something a little controversial, like just to kind of boom, get it out, like being contrary in a certain way, not like a 6 contrary, which will be more like devil's advocate, but just sort of like saying something that's a little bit gonna like wind people up or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like 5 fixers are gonna get into some corner of, they're gonna go into some far corner of an idea, and so they're pushing out concepts or viewpoints. It's like they're putting themselves in a corner in a way, whereas
and dropping bombs from that corner.
Right. Whereas 6 fixers, when they go crazy on social media, it's like, oh, there's conspiracy theories. Did you know these CIA's cooking babies in vats of oil? You know, some shit like that. That is based on hearsay. But a 5 or a 5 fixer might put something out there, but it's like they've gone so deep into it, and it's not just reactive hearsay. They're gonna like list out like, this is why I think this thing, and overwhelm you with.
They're gonna build it.
Right. Like they've gone so deep into this off the deep end thing that, you know, they can go all day listing their reasonings for it. But I think the difference is that 5 they hone in on one point usually. Like it's gonna be
keep pressing that button.
Granular over focus on trying to find the singular point, but then overwhelming you with, you know, shit around that point. Whereas 6 can feel like a bunch of references and trying to orient, but it can feel more chaotic with the 6 fix, because it's like I don't know, like distrusting the process even while they're doing it. So 6 fixers are like, I'm not sure, and I'm trying to find some footing here with these references and with these outside sources to try to land on something that I can feel okay with.
5 is kind of like condensing down into a fine point. It's like a nuclear tip.
Yes.
Right. Where and there's a power element there, just as nuclear power, you know, that metaphor is alluding to, where like I'm condensing, and I've got this bomb now, right? It's so packed tight, and it's in such a small space, but I've got this bomb back here in my bunker, right? And it's a certain kind. So that's a certain kind of actually like attaining power, right? And that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
John, you remember with the show Dark that we just did the pod on, you know, looking at the show as this huge labyrinth, to find out at the end that everything comes down to a singular point.
Exactly.
Origin. And then once you figure out the origin,
you can reconstruct the whole thing from a different point of view.
Exactly. And so it was really cool to see that show was structured in that way, that everything was leading to a singular point. And that sort of is a good example of what five and five fixers are trying to do. It's like you're trying to find this origin point and work from there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. I think in contrast, the six fix, there's a lot of justifying. And I don't
Yes.
just mean that like sometimes that might sound like a negative thing, but it's not. That might be a little hard, like a strong sense, but there is these sort of justification going. And so in contrast to the five fix, there is that David used the term "in my bunker," whereas the six fix, it's like like in a war movie or something where somebody jumps out of the bunker and then they start just like blowing people away or whatever. It's like that. There's like instead of just being like, pow, pow, it's like they come out and they're like, it's like having a Rambo moment in a sense when they feel attacked or when they feel overwhelmed or when they're trying to figure things out. It's like going to all these different places and trying to refer and justify and reference and weave things together in a way that makes some sort of coherent sense for them.
Mhm.
And when they're like feeling attacked, though, it can be this kind of just unloading. A five fixer won't, generally speaking, unload quite the same way.
Right.
Whereas like a six fixer, you'll get these moments of just like expulsion of something.
It's also partly that it's a superego type six is.
Right.
And so there's the constant thing of, are my views or your views morally good or bad?
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge apparatus to bring into some places, that it doesn't need to be brought into, let's say, right? If like a five's just is amorally, looking at whatever they're into, right? They're not,
Right.
it's not about, which side am I going to be on at the end of this? And is it going to be the good people?
That's a very good point because for some people who to land on whether they're six fixed or five fixed, something that stands out about five sometimes is they end up inadvertently disturbing people because of how dispassionately they look at disturbing, quote unquote, disturbing material, just observing it.
That's it.
Neutrally, because five is detached and emotionally neutral. Whereas six has some compulsion to say, those people are the bad people over there. Don't follow them because they're assholes.
Yep. And here's all the research that I did to show how bad they are.
They're bad. And so there's a compulsion to figure out what is the good or bad viewpoint, and that's influencing their way of. It's something I deal with my 8 sister. She's six fixed. Of what's a good or bad viewpoint. I might just observe something, and she'll counter with, check your biases. Check the perspective that you have is inherently not good. That kind of a thing.
And that's building a team too. If you're with the good people that all believe this thing, whereas five goes into the alienation of the disturbing and the amoral.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense in terms of like in the past, for example, as y'all are well aware, when I started saying that sexual instinct is based in sexual attraction and it's the instinct of putting oneself ahead of sexual competition, and I was like, and I had done all that research to like back that up in terms of the role it played in sexual selection, all this kind of stuff like this. I got accused of like all kinds of weird sexist stuff because I was supposedly describing the sexual instincts from a male point of view. And the attacks that came at me were like really intense, and I didn't understand them. Like I don't understand what they're coming from, and I think it had to do with because the stuff I found out about the sexual instinct challenges so much about our sexual norms and social norms that it was like I thought I was just reporting information, and I was like, oh yeah, like we were all polyfidelitous, or had multiple sexual partners throughout our lives in prehistoric things. Monogamy is actually a construction, blah blah blah. People are getting mad at me and accusing me all this kind of shit, and part of it's probably my loudmouth delivery style, social blind stuff.
It's not just that. It's the fact that you were just reporting dispassionately about and very clearly about things that people felt disturbed by, and that's something that fives and five fixers, whether or not you're social blind, can run into.
Isn't this just very interesting? Like, it's very counter to what we've all been taught. Like.
Well, and that's again the thing is the mainstream view on all of that stuff is set into a morality,
Yes.
Yeah, and you were doing you were not giving a fuck about morality. You were just going into the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also truth that isn't orienting to the current as understood structure of the way people relate.
Well,
And
that
I think
too.
part of the sixth thing is always keeping an eye on how this is relating to the collective thought,
True.
or what does science currently
Like, is this
think of.
idea like serving a collective health? Is that what you mean?
It not necessarily always health, but that's part of it. But also, like, where is the collective currently on this? I think sixes will always start from the point of, like, for example, like, what do scientists currently think of time? Maybe a five would just go into that and go to the outskirts of what that is and maybe present something that's challenging. Whereas a six might want to integrate, like, what the current accepted viewpoint of what time of scientists think about time. And that's kind of like the whole scientific method or academia is based on, like, peer reviews. And if other people agree that this is what it is, then that's what people say it is. But then if you recognize that it takes some crazy person to push things beyond what the current group of scientists agree is the truth, until those scientists come around to thinking that way. And, like, 50 years later, we think it's something completely different. So there's this process of the sixes sort of maintaining a collective viewpoint. And so an idea that challenges that is always going to be met with resistance.
They're like protecting the canon.
Yes.
So what about seven fixers? What's the deal with them?
Yeah, what is the deal?
They're looking for the future new possibilities. I did a Trifix call with someone who was trying to figure out their head fix, and this person thought they might be five fixed, and it was a little bit difficult to sort of land on what her fixes might be. And we started having a conversation about, like, her hobbies and how she approached, like, she was a musician, how she approached working on a piece. Like, how do you get into it? And she admitted that when she gets into a piece, that the way that she goes about working on it is just like taking interesting pieces or mixing interesting things together. Like, there's this sense of sevens and seven fixers just caring more about the interesting possibilities than anything else. Just like, what could happen, and just getting drunk on what could happen and possibilities.
Yeah, five is a little bit more about truth, and sevens, and sevens more about just creating more variety and interestingness.
Yeah,
variety is a good word.
What I see between David and I is, I get very granular, and, like, we're going further in.
Yeah.
Whereas David goes, here's one angle, here's another angle, here's another angle, here's an angle over here, and it's sort of like this multifaceted. Like, if I want to go, like, super into something, it's like a focus point, whereas he has this view of looking at layers and layers and layers and different angles to almost
different
like
angles.
It's almost like what are those fucking Buckminster Fuller balls, that are like, they're like these, like, circular structures, but they're like made of different little
different colors
shapes. Well, yeah, it's like different colors but different shapes, and so it's like Cerebro or something, where you're like going from all around to see the thing in the center.
Yeah,
kaleidoscopic.
Exactly. Kaleidoscope's a good one.
When I hit him up about Trifix like 4 or 5 years ago, we looked at it from like 4 or 5 different angles. Like,
exactly.
Like, you're just like, okay, let's look at it from this way. If you're a sexual self-pres 8, and what that's gonna do to your heart fix, and then, okay, let's look at it from, like, the 2 secondary fixes being, like, opposing the core fix. So, like, it gave me like 4 different ways. Eventually, what it took is I found the one that worked for me, and I went into that and sort of figured it out on my own. But he gave me, like, a menu of options, different perspectives.
Yeah, no, I think of things as there's an object in my hand, and I'm turning it, and I'm seeing new things as I turn the object different ways.
Yeah.
As opposed to going deeper in.
Yeah, and what worked for me is, like, I had to find the perspective where things clicked for me, where I could see clearly, and then I just wanted to go deeper into that perspective. I think what it was just the zeroing in on the center alone, because I wanted to see, like,
the thing in isolation from other things.
Right. That's basically what worked for me. It's like all these other things were interesting, and eventually all made sense once I was able to pull back. But I didn't really feel sure until I could isolate the thing. And that was one of the perspectives that David shared with me, is like, you got to go into the heart center. But he just had like four or five other perspectives. But that was the one that I went with eventually.
One of the things with 7 too, maybe it's part of what I already said, but is it just interestingness, colorfulness, unusualness, exoticness of a thing, an idea, a person is all it needs to be. Right?
Yes.
It doesn't matter if I'm burrowing into the fine point that is the truth. It's just, is this thing, does it animate up into a 3D architecture that's a really cool thing to look at, in my mind?
Yeah, it's totally, yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll sort of forego maybe like what's, let's say, realistic.
Yes.
Because it's fascinating or cool or novel.
It just feels it means like ideas for the sake of entertainment. That's what it feels like to me.
That's it. That's right. It's like on the 7 call, there was a lot more. I got a deeper sense with the core 7s of just how much it's, I guess I always associated 7 more with doing, but it really is so much in the head, conceptualizing and,
imagining. Yeah, that's a good 7 fix word is imagination. And one thing I learned from that typing call with the person who was looking at their head fix 5 versus 7 was just the amount of wanting to actualize imagination, just to taste it and move on. Because if you stay too long with it, it loses this sort of color and wonder. And there was this pattern of just wanting to create newness and experience it for a short period of time and then move on to the next. You have to keep moving to have these new and interesting experiences. And so if you have a 7 fix, that's going to be a pattern for you of getting drunk on animated and interesting possibilities.
Yeah, it's certain self-indulgence. Getting drunk is cueing me on that. It's almost narcissistic in conceptual space.
Not just in conceptual space.
Yeah.
There's an aspect of 7 fix that I should mention, of the sense of expecting, because you are generating interestingness for yourself, you expect that other people are going to be excited.
There you go.
And into the interestingness. So 7 fixers have no sort of reservation putting that stuff on people.
You guys are going to be excited about this. I'm sure of it. Sure of it. Look how colorful it is. How could you not be entertained and want more of this?
Right. These unrequested nudes that you didn't ask for.
Yeah, of course.
Hey, how do you distinguish having a 7 wing and a 5 fix?
That's a good one.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one for me, because
I only ask good questions.
That's the 5 fix.
Yeah.
I initially, when I first got into the Enneagram, I thought I was a 7 because I'm an 8 wing 7, and if anyone who knows me knows that I have a decent amount of 7 qualities. Just joker, zany, that kind of a thing. Pretty fast paced. Yeah, my hair. But so to distinguish, I had a moment in time a couple years where I thought I was 7 fix because why wouldn't I think that? And what made the difference for me, actually, I needed help to figure out that I had a 5 fix. It was hard for me to separate my inherent whatever 7-ness from the way that I was conceptualizing and thinking about things.
Mm-hmm.
And so the difference between a wing and a fix is that when you have a wing, like, I have a 7 wing, it's almost like it's built into my core 8 stuff. My core 8 type structure has inherent, 7 qualities. But when it comes to the way that I tried to orient to what I don't understand, that it takes on the shape of the 5 wanting to find the origin point. It's also this weird combination of being this sort of zany, extroverted type of person with also kind of really detached qualities or detached points of views. It took me some time to separate those two things, to see that, yes, I have these built-in 7 qualities, but when it comes to when I'm trying to figure things out, I'm sort of digging to find the point.
Well, I like the way you put it in terms of like there's sort of the 7-ish enhancement to your 8 expression versus actually how you cognitively process and conceptualize.
Yes,
That's right.
that's the difference. And that really comes back to, I mean, this is a 5 fix perspective, but the clearest way to land on your trifix is to isolate each center by itself. I mean, you can get a lot from combining centers and looking at fixes and stems and all that kind of stuff. But to really get clear on what's going on, you have to look at, what am I doing in the headspace? How am I figuring things out? How do I view myself in the heart space? How do I, what kind of pressure am I putting on myself in terms of how I'm viewing myself and how people should view me? That was the most helpful thing to get really clear. But also, it's also getting clear about how to work with each of your fixes. Also, it's like knowing your trifix is great and all, but like, what do you do once you know it? So isolating each center. If you know that you're 5 fix, you might get a lot from listening to a podcast or one of our pods about type 5s and getting more clear on what the 5 fixation is.
Yeah, definitely.
That was good, what we just did. Yeah.
There's a little bit more because we just kind of went specifically into each center. There's more David stuff where you're sort of looking at fixes and stems.
Yeah.
Looking at like all the how
chemistry of film.
Yeah. That's more David stuff.
Yeah, let's do that next.
All right, guys.
Good call.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, man.
Later.
All right, later.